I wasn't planning on talking to anyone that day. Honestly, I was just trying to enjoy the city park, clear my head, and maybe get a few decent photos of the cherry blossoms before they disappeared for the year. You know how it is. Sometimes you just want to be alone with your camera, capturing moments, not people. But then he showed up, and everything kind of flipped. So I'm sitting on this bench fiddling with my camera settings, trying to get the perfect shot of these pink petals fluttering in the light breeze. The sunlight was just right, soft but bright, and I was feeling pretty good about my amateur photography skills. Then this guy walks up, probably early 30s, wearing a worn leather jacket and these round glasses that made him look like he stepped out of some indie film. He smiles at me, this warm, easy smile that feels like it's meant just for me, and says, "Hey, do you mind taking my picture?" I'm trying to update my online dating profile and need something decent. I blinked, caught off guard. I'm usually the one behind the camera, not the other way around. Plus, I don't usually talk to strangers in parks, much less take their pictures. But something about him, maybe it was the way he looked a little nervous but hopeful, made me say, sure, why not? He pulls out his phone and I tell him to stand by this cherry blossom tree because the light there is perfect. He poses a little awkwardly, but there's something genuine in his smile. I snap a few shots, chatting casually while doing it. His name's Jamie. We swap a little about photography and the park, and honestly, I'm kind of enjoying this unexpected break from my usual routine. Then, right when I'm about to hand back his phone, he does this thing that completely stops me. He asks, "Hey, would you want to take a picture? Together?" I blink again, because is this really happening? I mean, I get that people ask for pictures, but asking for one together? It's bold, it's unexpected, and honestly, it kind of makes my heart race in a way I wasn't prepared for that morning. I laugh nervously, unsure how to respond, but then he just grins and says, "I promise I'm not weird. Just thought it'd be fun." And that's when I realize this random encounter might turn into something way more than just a few photos in the park. I took a deep breath, still feeling this weird mix of excitement and awkwardness buzzing in my chest. "Sure," I said, mostly because I was curious where this was going and didn't want to be asterisk that guy who says no to a stranger's random request in a park, especially when he was looking right at me, like he really meant it. Jamie smiled, his eyes brightening a little, and shifted closer. We stood side by side under the cherry blossoms, the petals softly drifting around us. It didn't feel like a photo pose at first. It felt like a moment, like something in the air was waiting to be caught on camera, but more than that, something between us was quietly shifting. I held my camera up and fumbled through the settings. "Okay, ready?" I asked, feeling kind of silly but also wanting to get it right. He nodded and I snapped a few shots. When I lowered the camera, he looked at the display and laughed softly. "Not bad. You're better than I expected." I threw him a mock glare. "Hey, I'm not a pro, but I've got some tricks." We spent a couple more minutes exchanging stories about photography, him telling me how he tried to learn on his own after college, me explaining how I mostly just shoot for fun, but sometimes dream about doing something more serious with it. The conversation felt easy, like we were old friends catching up rather than strangers who just met 5 minutes ago. At some point, Jamie asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I hesitated for a second because, well, I wasn't exactly in the habit of spontaneously buying coffee with random guys I'd just met. But then I looked at him and thought, what the hell? Life's too short for what ifs. "Yeah, let's do that," I said. We walked over to this little cafe just outside the park, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that looked like it was written by someone who loved poetry. Jamie ordered a latte, I went for a black coffee, and we grabbed a small table by the window. The conversation kept flowing. He told me about his job working as a graphic designer, how he'd recently moved to the city after years in a small town, and how he was still figuring out what he wanted in life. I told him about my job at a bookstore, how I spent more time recommending books than actually reading them, and how photography was my escape from the daily grind. There was a point when he laughed at something I said, and I swear, it felt like the whole world got lighter for a second. I caught myself studying him, how his eyes crinkled, how his hands moved when he talked, how he had this way of making the space between us feel smaller without saying much. We were about to leave when Jamie pulled out his phone again and said, "Hey, Can I send you the photo we took? I want to see how it looks on a bigger screen. I nodded, figuring why not. He typed in his number, and before I knew it, the message was waiting on my phone. I opened the photo, and damn, it looked good. The way the cherry blossoms framed us, how natural we looked together. That picture wasn't just a snapshot, it was something more. Jamie grinned. You sure you don't want to hang out a little longer? There's a record store a few blocks away that's pretty amazing. I hesitated, but honestly, I wasn't ready to say goodbye yet. Yeah, I'm down. We walked through the streets, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Inside the record store, rows of vinyl stretched in every direction. Jamie picked up a few albums, telling me about his favorite bands, and I found myself opening up too, talking more about the music I'd loved growing up, the stuff I was embarrassed to admit. At one point, Jamie turned to me and said, "I'm really glad I asked you to take that picture." I smiled, feeling the warmth spread through me again. Me too. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but in that moment, I felt something real, something unexpected. And honestly, it felt like the start of something worth holding on to. We ended up spending the next few hours wandering around the neighborhood, slipping into little shops and chatting like we'd known each other forever. It was weird how natural it felt. Usually when I meet someone new, I'm on guard, thinking about what to say next, trying to read between the lines, figuring out if they're interested or just being polite. But with Jamie, none of that mattered. It was just easy. At one point, we found ourselves on a quiet side street, a little out of the way from the main buzz of the city. He stopped and looked up at this old brick building covered in ivy and said, "This used to be my favorite hangout spot when I first moved here. It's got this little rooftop garden that's kind of a secret." I raised an eyebrow. A secret rooftop garden? Sounds like something out of a movie. Yeah, it's a little hidden gem. Made me feel like the city wasn't so big and lonely, he said softly. I was about to ask if he wanted to show it to me when he surprised me by pulling out an old key on a chain from his pocket. "Wanna come? I promise it's worth it." I hesitated. It felt suddenly a bit surreal. This stranger who I'd just met asking me to climb up to a secret rooftop with him. But then again, nothing about today had been ordinary. "All right," I said, feeling that familiar rush of curiosity mixed with a hint of nervousness. We climbed a narrow fire escape that rattled under our feet, the city sounds dimming as we got higher. When we finally pushed open the door to the rooftop, it was like stepping into another world. The garden was small but lush, filled with potted plants and wildflowers in full bloom. Twinkle lights were strung between the railings, and there was a little bench facing out toward the skyline. Jamie smiled, clearly happy to share this secret place with someone. I come here when I need to think or just get away from everything. I took it all in. The fresh air, the quiet above the city chaos, the way the sun was starting to dip and paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, and for a moment I almost forgot everything else. Jamie sat down on the bench, patting the spot next to him. I joined him, and we just sat there, side by side, watching the city shift around us. I don't usually do stuff like this, I admitted after a while. Meet someone and end up on some secret rooftop garden. He laughed quietly. Me neither. But maybe that's a sign, right? That we're supposed to step out of our comfort zone sometimes. I looked over at him, feeling my heart beat a little faster. Yeah, maybe it is. There was this pause, that perfect kind of silence, where you don't feel the need to fill the space with words. Then Jamie turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "Do you want to know the real reason I asked you to take that picture?" he asked. I shrugged, curious. I guess I was hoping it'd be a way to start something. Not just a photo, but, a connection. Something more than scrolling through profiles or awkward first dates. I smiled, feeling something warm spread in my chest. "I'm glad you did." He reached out, and for a second, I thought he might take my hand. Instead, he lightly touched my camera, like it was a bridge between us. "Maybe we can keep taking pictures together," he said, "and see where it goes." I looked at him, at how genuine he was, and felt that rare kind of hope you don't expect to find on a random afternoon. "Yeah," I said softly, "I'd like that." We stayed on that rooftop until the stars began to peek out, the city lights twinkling below us. And as I looked at Jamie, I thought maybe this was the start of something real, something I hadn't been looking for, but was more than ready to hold on to. After that night on the rooftop, things didn't immediately turn into some whirlwind romance or anything. Honestly, it felt more like the beginning of a steady, slowly unfolding story, like a book you can't put down but also don't want to rush through. Over the next few days, Jamie and I kept in touch, mostly through texts filled with goofy jokes and occasional photo swaps of whatever we were up to. It was easy, comfortable. One afternoon, he invited me to join him at a local art gallery opening. It was the kind of event I'd usually avoid. Too crowded, too loud, too many people pretending to know what all the abstract stuff meant. But he insisted, and I figured, why not? If nothing else, it'd be a good chance to see him again. The gallery was a converted warehouse with high ceilings and walls splashed with bold colors. Jamie was already there when I arrived, standing near a painting that looked like a chaotic swirl of blues and reds. He waved me over, smiling like I had just shown up with a secret to share. We spent the evening wandering the space, talking about the art and how people put pieces of themselves into it. Jamie told me about his own attempts at painting, mostly experimental stuff he kept in a sketchbook. And I found myself opening up about the way photography helped me process things I couldn't always say out loud. At one point, we ended up in a quieter corner by a large window overlooking the street. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, and Jamie turned to me with that same easy smile. He said, "I'm really glad you came tonight. I don't usually open up like this with people, but with you it just feels different." I felt my throat tighten a bit. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's rare to find someone you can just be yourself around. There was a pause, the kind where you're both thinking about what to say next but not rushing it. Then Jamie reached out and brushed a bit of hair behind my ear. Just a small, gentle gesture, but it sent a jolt through me. "Can I be honest?" he asked. I nodded, heart pounding. "I've been wanting to kiss you since the moment you took that first picture in the park." I blinked, caught off guard but not surprised. I'd felt the tension too. The little moments, the way he looked at me, the way his smile lingered longer than necessary. And now, hearing the words out loud, it just felt right. Without thinking too much, I leaned in and our lips met. It was soft and tentative at first, like testing the waters, but then it deepened. An unspoken promise that whatever this was, it was worth exploring. After that night, things started to shift. We went from casual texts to late-night phone calls, from quick coffee meetups to long weekend strolls through the city. Jamie introduced me to his favorite spots, tiny bookstores, hole-in-the-wall diners, and a little jazz bar where the music wrapped around us like a warm blanket. One evening, a few weeks after that first kiss, we found ourselves back on the rooftop garden. The city was quiet beneath us, and Jamie had brought a small picnic basket filled with snacks and a bottle of cheap but decent wine. We sat close, the kind of close where shoulders touched and fingers found each other without words. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" I asked, swirling the wine in my glass. He looked out at the skyline, then back at me. "All the time. But with you, it doesn't feel scary. It feels hopeful." I smiled, feeling the same. "Yeah, me too." We talked for hours, sharing dreams and fears, the kind of things you only say when you trust someone completely. And in that moment, beneath the stars and city lights, it felt like we'd found something rare. A connection that wasn't just about the pictures or the chance meeting in the park, but about two people willing to take a chance on each other. Looking back now, I realize it all started with a simple request and a photo. But what grew from that was so much more, something I never expected but can't imagine living without. A few weeks after that rooftop night, things started to settle into this comfortable rhythm between Jamie and me. It was the kind of easy closeness I'd always hoped for but never quite believed I'd find. We'd text throughout the day, meet up for dinners, or just hang out watching terrible movies at his tiny apartment, which was cluttered with plants and old records and little things that felt like pieces of him scattered everywhere. But, of course, nothing stays perfectly smooth for long. One Saturday, Jamie invited me to come with him to this photography exhibit downtown. It was showcasing local artists, and since we both loved photography, it felt like a no-brainer. We met outside the gallery, the city buzzing around us like usual. Jamie was wearing this vintage denim jacket that looked like it had been through a few adventures, and I swear, every time I saw him in it, I got this goofy feeling like I was the luckiest guy alive just to be with him. Inside, the gallery was quiet, the walls lined with black and white prints that caught moments both ordinary and extraordinary. We wandered from piece to piece, sharing thoughts, pointing out details, the way a shadow fell, or the way a smile wasn't quite a smile. At one point, we stood in front of a photo that was just a blurry shot of a couple holding hands. It was messy and imperfect, but somehow full of emotion. Jamie looked at me, his eyes soft. Makes you think about the stories behind every picture, right? Like what's real and what's staged. I nodded. Yeah, like how some moments are just raw, not perfect, but honest. He smiled and stepped closer, brushing his hand lightly against mine. I like our story, even if it's messy. Feels honest. I squeezed his hand back, feeling a warmth that went deeper than the afternoon sun filtering through the gallery windows. After the exhibit, we went for a walk along the river. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and purple as the sun dipped low. We didn't talk much, just let the quiet moments fill the space between us. Then, out of nowhere, Jamie stopped and turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" he said, voice a little shaky. "Of course." He took a breath. "I've been thinking about moving in together. I mean, if you're up for it. I know it's fast, but I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." My heart did this weird little flip. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, but another part hesitated. Moving in together was a big step. It meant merging lives, routines, and vulnerabilities. I want that too, I said truthfully. But maybe we should talk about what that actually means. Like, what we expect, what we need. Jamie smiled, relieved. Yeah, totally. I don't want to rush anything. Just wanted to know how you felt. We kept walking, the city lights flickering on as night took over. It felt like the start of a new chapter, one that scared me a little, but also excited me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. A few days later, we sat down in Jamie's living room, surrounded by boxes and half-packed bags. He was moving most of his stuff over to my apartment, and we were figuring out how to blend two very different spaces into one. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when we argued about where to put a lamp or whose turn it was to do dishes, but there were also moments when we laughed until our sides hurt, or found little notes tucked into each other's backpacks. One night, after a particularly long day, we sat on the couch with takeout and a movie neither of us was really watching. Jamie looked over and said, "You know, I'm scared sometimes. Scared of messing this up." I reached out and took his hand. Me too. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared means we care. He smiled, squeezing my hand back. Yeah, I like that. Living together wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And with every little challenge, every late-night conversation, every shared laugh and quiet moment, I felt that connection grow stronger. Looking back, I never thought a simple request to take a picture in the park would lead to all this. But honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. Because sometimes the best stories start with the smallest moments and the willingness to say yes. About 3 months into living together, the novelty of sharing space started to settle into something deeper, something that felt less like a new adventure and more like home. It's funny how you don't realize what home means until you're living it with someone else. It's not just walls and furniture. It's the little unspoken things, like how Jamie always brews his coffee the exact same way, or how I leave my shoes piled up by the door, even though he complains about it every single time. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual and decided to make breakfast. I'm not exactly a chef, but I managed to whip up some scrambled eggs and toast. When Jamie stumbled into the kitchen, half asleep and rubbing his eyes, I handed him a plate with a goofy smile. "Wow," he said, genuinely impressed. "Are you sure you're the same guy who can't even boil water without burning it?" I laughed, feeling this warm glow inside that had nothing to do with the eggs. We ate together in comfortable silence, the sunlight pouring through the window and casting patterns on the table. Later that day, Jamie suggested we go out for a walk along the river. It had become our sort of ritual, something we did when we needed to clear our heads or just be outside together without distractions. As we strolled, he reached out and took my hand. It felt natural, like a quiet affirmation that we were in this, whatever this was, together. We ended up sitting on a bench overlooking the water, watching the ripples catch the fading light. Jamie turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about the future? Like, not just next week or next month, but way down the road?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, that I just tried to live in the moment. But the truth was, with Jamie, I'd started imagining things I never thought I would, a life that included him in ways I hadn't dared to hope for. Yeah, I finally said, "I do," and it feels less scary now. He smiled and squeezed my hand. Me too. The weeks passed with the kind of quiet happiness that sneaks up on you. We settled into routines but also made room for surprises, like the time Jamie showed up with tickets to a concert for a band we both loved, or when I dragged him out for an impromptu road trip to a nearby town just because I wanted to chase the sunset. One Thursday night, after a long day at work, I came home to find Jamie in the living room, surrounded by candles and soft music playing from the speakers. "What's all this?" I asked, smiling but also a little curious. He looked up, cheeks flushed. "I was thinking, we've been living together for a while now, and I wanted to do something special. For us." He stood up and pulled me into a hug. Then, almost shyly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and saw a photo. Our photo, from that day in the park, printed on nice paper with a little handwritten note on the back. "From the first picture to forever." I blinked, my throat tightening. Jamie looked at me, eyes shining. "I don't know what forever looks like exactly, but I know I want to find out with you." I felt my heart pounding, and in that moment, I realized how much he meant to me, not just as someone I loved, but as someone who made me feel seen and safe. I pulled him close and whispered, "I want that too." We stood there for a long while, holding each other, the quiet of the apartment wrapping around us like a promise. After that night, everything felt different, in the best way possible. We weren't just two people sharing a space. We were building a life together, one moment at a time. Of course, there were still challenges, days when work stressed me out, or when Jamie worried about his career, or when small arguments popped up over dumb stuff like what to watch on TV. But even then, we faced it together. We talked, we listened, we found our way back to each other. One weekend, we took a trip back to that same park where it all started. The cherry blossoms had just begun to bloom again, and standing there with Jamie, watching the petals drift down around us, I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. He pulled me close and said, "Remember when I asked you to take my picture?" I laughed. "Yeah, best yes I ever gave." He smiled, his hands slipping into mine. "Here's to 1,000 more." And with that, I knew sometimes life's best moments come from the simplest beginnings, like a picture taken in a park, or a smile shared between two strangers who decide to take a chance. I never would have guessed that day would change everything, but it did. And honestly, I'm glad it did. Those cherry blossoms that day felt like a quiet sort of magic. Jamie and I stood there in the park, the petals swirling lazily around us, and for a moment, everything else just disappeared. It was strange how something so simple, a tree, some flowers, a photo, had led me to this point where I felt something I'd never really allowed myself to feel before. Hope. Real, honest hope. We stayed longer than I expected, just walking and talking, as if the world had slowed down just for us. Jamie told me about little dreams he hadn't shared with anyone, like opening a small gallery someday, or traveling to places with old streets and stories. I shared things I'd never said out loud, how I'd always been afraid of getting close to people, how photography gave me a way to see the world without feeling completely vulnerable. When we circled back to the bench where I'd first taken his picture, Jamie stopped and looked at me, that familiar soft smile playing on his lips. "You know," he said, "it's crazy how one photo can change so much." I nodded, feeling my heart thumping hard. "Yeah. It's like the start of a story, but the kind you actually want to write." He reached out and took my hand, fingers intertwining naturally with mine. "I'm glad we're writing it together." I felt a lump in my throat and squeezed his hand back. "Me too." After that day, I started noticing the little things that made us us. How Jamie always left his glasses perched on his head when he was deep in thought. How I'd find his favorite records scattered around the apartment, or how he'd text me dumb jokes in the middle of the afternoon just to make me smile. We'd fallen into this rhythm where our worlds blended without effort. One night, a few weeks later, we found ourselves at Jamie's place, sitting cross-legged on the floor with takeout containers spread out around us. We were binge-watching some old sitcom neither of us had seen before, laughing at the ridiculous plot twists and bad acting. Mid-episode, Jamie leaned over and whispered, "Can I ask you something kind of serious?" I paused the show and looked at him. "Of course." He bit his lip, looking a little nervous. "What do you think about us? Like, long term?" I felt my chest tighten. But honestly, I'd been thinking about that exact question myself. "I think," I said slowly, "that I want us. Not just now, but in all the messy, complicated ways that come with it. I want to be the guy you come home to, the one who's there when things get hard." Jamie's eyes softened, and he reached for my hand again. "That's exactly how I feel." We sat there for a while, hands linked, sharing that quiet certainty that felt like the foundation beneath everything else. But of course, life isn't always a neat, perfect scene from a movie. A few days later, I got a call that shook me more than I wanted to admit. A job offer in another city. It was a great opportunity, exactly the kind of break I'd been hoping for in my career, but it also meant uprooting everything, including what Jamie and I were building together. When I told Jamie, I could see the hope in his eyes flicker, the way his smile faltered just for a moment. "So," he said quietly, "what do we do now?" I had no easy answer. Truth was, I was terrified of losing what we had, but also didn't want to give up a chance that might never come again. We spent that night talking, really talking, about fears, dreams, what we wanted, and what we could compromise. We didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, it didn't feel like we had to have them right away. "I don't want to lose you," Jamie said, voice thick with emotion. I shook my head. "You're not losing me. We just have to figure out how to make it work. Together." It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was ours. Over the next few weeks, we mapped out possibilities, weekend visits, calls, maybe even me moving back sooner than planned if things didn't work out. It wasn't easy, and there were nights when the distance felt like an impossible wait. But through it all, the foundation we'd built, the photos, the rooftop garden, the quiet moments in the city held strong. One evening, not long before I was set to leave, Jamie surprised me with a small album he'd made. It was filled with pictures from all our time together: the cherry blossoms, the gallery, the record store, the rooftop garden. Each photo had a little note, a memory, or a promise. I looked through it, overwhelmed, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "It's so we don't forget," he said softly, "no matter how far apart we are." I hugged him tight. We won't forget. Not for a second. Standing there, in that small apartment filled with memories and quiet love, I realized that sometimes life throws you curveballs you don't expect, but the people who truly matter, they're the ones who catch you when you fall. And as I prepared to step into the unknown, I knew one thing for certain. No matter where life took me, Jamie was a part of my story now. And that was the best kind of picture I could ever want to hold on to. The night before I left, Jamie and I sat on that same rooftop garden, the place that had become our secret refuge. The city hummed softly below us, lights twinkling like distant stars, and the air held that familiar scent of earth and flowers. It felt like time had slowed just for us, giving space to everything unsaid. We didn't need to pretend that the distance wouldn't be hard, or that the uncertainty ahead was easy to face. But there was a quiet strength in sitting side by side, fingers loosely entwined, knowing we were choosing this despite the unknown. Jamie looked over at me, eyes steady. "Promise me we'll keep taking pictures, even when we're apart, so we can keep sharing moments that aren't here, but still real." I smiled softly, feeling my throat tighten. "I promise. And maybe one day soon, we'll take pictures in the same place again." He leaned his head on my shoulder, and for a long while we just watched the city breathe beneath us. The flight the next morning felt surreal. I held onto my phone like it was a lifeline, knowing that no matter how many miles stretched between us, we'd keep finding ways back to each other. It wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about the small things. Late night calls, the photos we'd send, the plans we'd make. Weeks turned into months, and each visit, each message, became a thread weaving us closer, stitching the distance into a new kind of closeness. It wasn't always easy. There were lonely moments and doubts, but there was also a steady, unshakable sense that we were in it together. One chilly evening, almost half a year later, Jamie showed up at my door, suitcase in hand, that same mischievous smile lighting up his face. "I thought it was time to add a new chapter," he said simply. I pulled him inside, laughter and relief spilling between us. Standing there, in the messy, imperfect reality of shared space again, I realized something. Love isn't about never facing challenges. It's about choosing one another, day after day, picture by picture, moment by moment. And so here we are, still learning, still growing, still finding beauty in the everyday. From a simple photo in a park to a life built on trust and hope, our story feels like the truest thing I've ever known. Sometimes, the best beginnings come from the smallest chances. And sometimes, those chances turn into forever,